Eddie Van Halen was sitting in the back row of a charity auction in Beverly Hills, watching as one of his own guitars came up for bidding. He'd donated the guitar months ago and forgotten about it. When the bidding opened at $5,000, Eddie raised his paddle. Another bidder, a wealthy collector sitting 2 rows ahead, immediately bid $10,000. Eddie bid $12,000. The collector turned around, looked at Eddie with irritation, and said loudly, "If you were a real Van Halen fan, you'd know this guitar's worth way more than that. Stop wasting everyone's time with low bids." Eddie smiled and raised his paddle again. The auctioneer, who had just recognized Eddie, froze mid-sentence. What happened next became one of the most talked-about moments in music memorabilia auction history. It was an evening in October 2007, and Eddie Van Halen was attending a charity auction at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, raising money for music education programs in Los Angeles schools, a cause Eddie cared about deeply. He donated several items months earlier: a signed guitar, concert posters, memorabilia. Eddie sat in the back row wearing a blazer and jeans, trying to keep a low profile. The auction was well attended, maybe 200 people, a mix of wealthy donors, music collectors, and genuine fans. The auctioneer, David Chen, a professional who'd been running high-end charity auctions for 20 years, worked through the lots efficiently. Sports memorabilia, signed guitars, concert experiences, backstage passes. The crowd was engaged, bidding was spirited. Then Lot 47 came up, an Eddie Van Halen custom guitar signed and authenticated with a certificate of provenance. The guitar had been used during recording sessions for the Van Halen album Balance and still had Eddie's personal settings marked on it with tape. Eddie sat up slightly. He'd completely forgotten he'd donated this particular guitar. It was a good instrument, one of his working guitars from the mid-90s, not a stage guitar, but a studio guitar he'd used for writing and recording. He'd moved on to other guitars since then, but this one had sentimental value. Several songs had been written on it. The auctioneer began, "Lot 47, an authentic Eddie Van Halen custom guitar used in studio sessions, signed by the artist, with full provenance documentation. The guitar features Eddie's personal settings still marked on it with tape from the 1995 Balance recording sessions. This is a working instrument, not a display piece. It has the wear and character of actual studio use. We'll open bidding at $5,000. Several paddles went up immediately around the room. Eddie, more out of nostalgia than serious intent to buy, raised his paddle too. He remembered writing several songs on this guitar, the feel of the neck, the tone it produced, the late nights in the studio. "$5,000 to the gentleman in the back," the auctioneer said. "Do I hear 6? A man in the 5th row, expensive suit, slicked back hair, Rolex visible on his wrist, the look of someone who collected valuable items as investments rather than passion, raised his paddle confidently. "$10,000. The jump from 5 to 10 was aggressive, meant to intimidate smaller bidders out of the running. It worked. Several paddles lowered. But Eddie stayed up. The auctioneer acknowledged, "We have 10,000. Do I hear 11? Eddie raised his paddle. 12,000. The well-dressed collector in the 5th row turned around to see who was bidding against him. He saw a guy in a blazer and jeans, long hair, nothing particularly notable, certainly not someone who looked like he could afford to be bidding on high-end memorabilia at a Beverly Hills charity auction. The collector's expression showed annoyance. Who was this person? He bid again. 15,000. Eddie, genuinely enjoying the guitar now that he remembered its history, bid 16. The collector, now personally invested in winning, bid 18. Eddie bid 19. A few other bidders had dropped out, sensing this was becoming a two-person battle that would go higher than they wanted to spend. At this point, the collector stood up and turned to face Eddie directly. His face was red with frustration. "Look," the collector said loudly, "I don't know who you are, but I'm a serious collector. I've been collecting Van Halen memorabilia for 20 years. If you were a real Van Halen fan, you'd know this guitar's worth way more than 19,000. You're clearly just bidding to drive up the price. Either bid seriously or let real fans have it." The room went quiet. This was unusual. Bidders didn't normally confront each other during auctions. The auctioneer looked uncomfortable. Eddie smiled calmly. "I am bidding seriously. 20,000. The collector's jaw clenched. $25,000. And let me tell you something. Eddie Van Halen is a guitar god. This instrument has touched rock history. People like you who don't understand the value shouldn't even be here. 30,000, Eddie said quietly. 35, the collector shouted. I know what this guitar means to the Van Halen legacy. I've studied every album, every tour, every interview. I guarantee I know more about Eddie Van Halen than you do. Eddie was trying very hard not to laugh. 40,000, the collector spun back to face the auctioneer. 50,000, final bid. I'm ending this. David Chen, the auctioneer, had been squinting at the man in the back row during this exchange. Something about him was familiar. The long, curly hair, the facial structure, the age. David had been working in the music memorabilia world for 2 decades. He'd seen plenty of photos of Eddie Van Halen. Oh no, David thought. Oh no, no, no. 55,000, Eddie said. The collector was practically vibrating with anger. You don't even appreciate what you're bidding on. This is Eddie Van Halen's guitar. It's a piece of rock history. 60,000. David the auctioneer needed to stop this before it got worse. He held up his hand. Excuse me, sir, David said to the collector. Before we continue, I think there's something you should know about the gentleman you're bidding against. The collector turned. What? What could possibly be relevant? David looked at Eddie, who gave a small shrug. Your call. The gentleman in the back row, David said carefully, is Eddie Van Halen. The room went dead silent. Every head turned to look at Eddie. The collector's face went from red to white in about 2 seconds. His mouth opened and closed several times without sound coming out. No, that's not... You're joking. This is some kind of joke. Eddie stood up and gave a small wave to the room. Hi. Yeah, it's me. And I bid 65,000. Marcus Feldman stood frozen, replaying every word he'd just said in his mind. I just told Eddie Van Halen that he doesn't understand Eddie Van Halen's legacy. I said real fans would know the value. I said I guarantee I know more about Eddie Van Halen than he does. I literally said that to Eddie Van Halen. About Eddie Van Halen. Several people in the audience were trying not to laugh. Others were taking photos and videos. This was the kind of moment that would live on social media forever. Some people were looking at Marcus with sympathy, others with amusement. The collector sank back into his seat, one hand covering his mouth, his face resting in the other. Oh my God, this is awful. I can't believe this is happening right now. Eddie walked down the aisle toward Marcus. The room remained silent, waiting to see what would happen. Would Eddie be angry, amused? Would he embarrass the collector who had just spent 5 minutes lecturing him? Eddie reached Marcus's row and held out his hand. What's your name? The collector stood unsteadily, his expensive suit suddenly feeling like a disguise. Marcus Feldman. Mr. Van Halen, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I love your music so much, and I collect your memorabilia. And when I saw someone bidding low, I assumed they were only trying to resell it, and I got defensive, and I spoke without thinking, and I completely embarrassed myself in front of 200 people. I'm truly sorry. You love my music? Eddie asked calmly. More than anything, Marcus said. Van Halen changed my life. Your guitar playing inspired me to learn music. I'm not good enough to perform, but I collect what I can as a way to stay connected to the music that means everything to me. Eddie nodded slowly. And you were willing to pay $60,000 for that guitar? I would have gone to 100, Marcus said, maybe more. That guitar represents everything I love about your music. Eddie glanced at David the auctioneer. What's the current high bid? Your bid of $65,000, Mr. Van Halen. Eddie turned back to Marcus. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to bid $70,000. You're going to win this auction. You're going to take that guitar home. Marcus froze. But you were bidding on it. It's your guitar. It was my guitar, Eddie said. I donated it to this charity because music education matters. You're willing to pay $70,000 to support music education and own a piece of rock history. That's exactly what this auction is for. Bid $70,000. I can't. You were bidding on it. I was bidding because I forgot I donated it and got a little sentimental, Eddie admitted. But the whole reason I donated it was so a real fan could own it. You're clearly a real fan. Bid. Marcus raised his paddle, his hand trembling. 70,000. David the auctioneer, visibly moved by the moment, said, $70,000 to Mr. Feldman. Going once, going twice? Sold. The room burst into applause. Marcus looked overwhelmed. Eddie took out his wallet and handed Marcus a business card. That guitar should be set up properly. The action may have shifted during storage. Call this number. It's my guitar tech. Tell him Eddie said to set it up for you, no charge. He'll make sure it plays the way it should. Mr. Van Halen, I don't know what to say. Say you'll support music education programs, Eddie said. That's what tonight is really about, not the memorabilia, the cause. After the auction ended, Eddie and Marcus talked for nearly half an hour. Most of the room had cleared out, but a few people lingered, watching from a distance as Eddie Van Halen sat with a fan, fully engaged in conversation. Marcus described his collection, an entire room in his house dedicated to Van Halen memorabilia. Concert posters from every tour, signed albums carefully preserved, ticket stubs from every show he'd attended since 1984, magazine interviews, rare bootleg recordings. He had been to 47 Van Halen concerts. He could quote lyrics, explain the technical details of guitar solos, and name the equipment used on every album. You weren't exaggerating about being a serious collector, Eddie said, genuinely impressed by Marcus's knowledge and dedication. I was completely wrong about you not being a real fan, Marcus said, the embarrassment still lingering. I can't believe I said that to you. About yourself, about your own legacy. I actually explained to you what your guitar playing means to real fans. Eddie laughed, a genuine warm laugh. Marcus, that's the best part of this whole thing. You lectured Eddie Van Halen about what Eddie Van Halen means to real fans. You explained my own significance to me. This is going to be a great story. A humiliating story, Marcus corrected, but he was starting to smile despite himself. A great story, Eddie insisted. And you know what? You were passionate. You were defending something you care about deeply. You were willing to back up your words with serious money. Yeah, you didn't recognize me, but you were right about one thing. That guitar is worth more than $19,000. It's worth $70,000 because someone like you exists who cares enough to pay that. Your passion gave it value. Eddie signed several items for Marcus, took photos with him, and even recorded a short video message for Marcus's wife, who was apparently also a huge Van Halen fan and was going to die when she found out what happened. As they were saying goodbye, Marcus asked, Mr. Van Halen, can I ask why you were really bidding on your own guitar? Was it really just nostalgia? Eddie thought about that. Partly, but also I wanted to see if it would go for a good price. I care about this charity. If the bidding had been weak, I was going to bid it up to make sure the charity got a decent donation. You made that unnecessary. You paid way more than I would have. It's worth it, Marcus said. Every penny. To you, Eddie said. That's what makes it worth it. Not what I played on it, but what it means to you. That's the whole point of music. It's not about the musician. It's about the connection with the listener. Marcus Feldman would tell this story hundreds of times. The night I lectured Eddie Van Halen about Eddie Van Halen became his signature anecdote, always ending the same way. Eddie could have humiliated me. He could have outbid me and taken back his guitar. Instead, he stepped aside and let me win, then made sure the guitar would be set up properly. He turned my total embarrassment into the greatest night of my life. When Eddie died in 2020, Marcus posted photos from that auction night with the guitar still hanging on his wall. The post went viral. In 2007, I told Eddie Van Halen he wasn't a real fan of Eddie Van Halen. I lectured him about his own legacy. He could have destroyed me. Instead, he let me win, helped me with the guitar, and taught me that passion matters more than being right. Rest in peace to a legend who understood music belongs to the fans, not the musician. David Chen, the auctioneer, still calls it the most memorable auction of his career. I've seen a lot of celebrity charity auctions. I've never seen anything like watching a musician bid against a fan for his own guitar, then step aside so the fan could win. That taught me what real generosity looks like. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it. Have you ever been so passionate about something that you made a fool of yourself defending it? Share your story in the comments.